What is going on, everyone? Just out here for a walk in downtown Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada. And I've actually just got the lav mic on and I'm here on the cell phone for this video. Just wanted to do kind of a casual off-the-cuff walk and talk video. So in this video, I'm going to lay out my top 5 reasons for why everyone, men and women, should want big glutes. Before we dig into all that, what I want to do first is just quickly recap what the 4 primary functions of the glutes are. So the main function the glutes perform is hip extension. So basically driving your hips forward, kind of like you would in a deadlift or in a hip thrust. And then the other 3 are they also perform hip abduction. So you want to think of this like being abducted. So when I hear the word abduction, I think about being abducted by aliens. So being like taken away. So hip abduction would be like pushing your knees apart or moving them away from the midline. And then they also do hip external rotation, so like pointing your toes outward, and then posterior pelvic tilt. So you just want to keep those functions in mind. Now, something that I found really interesting, I remember reading this in the book Sapiens by Yuval Harari, and it's this fact that, or supposed fact, that humans actually evolved such big glute muscles, and it was because of this evolution that allowed us to stand upright and be able to walk around on our own 2 legs in the first place. Now, apparently this idea has come under scrutiny by some more recent literature, which says that it's kind of more like a chicken and egg scenario. So it isn't necessarily the case that we evolved these big glutes, which then allowed us to stand upright. It was more so the other way around. We kind of evolved an ability to stand upright independently and then developed really big glutes compared to our ape ancestors as a result. But in any case, whatever way the causality goes, I would say that having big glutes is really part of what makes us uniquely human. But with that aside, I would say that my number 1 reason why the glutes are so important and why everybody should want big ones is because of aesthetics. Being a bodybuilding channel, I guess this is somewhat central to me. But I think that if you just look at really any physique athlete, having well-developed glutes will really improve that overall appearance of muscularity. I think there's no better example of this than Ronnie Coleman. I mean, if you just look at his glutes, it's just absolutely insane, the level of definition and muscularity there. And I think it just really commands attention in all of his back poses and his side poses. Now, I also remember when I was at the NPC Nationals, watching the classic physique division there last year in Miami. I remember seeing a lot of the competitors that did the best or placed the best also happened to have the best glute development. This could have been a coincidence, but I don't think that that's the case. I mean, with some of these guys, even when they'd face the front, you could tell that they were quite muscular, but then when they would turn to the side and back on, they'd almost completely disappear. And it's this lack of glute development, I think, that contributes to this effect. Even if they have really big quads, you can see that when they turn to the side, there's just no real density or balance to the muscle. And the same thing is, of course, true in the bikini division. And there's probably no better example of this than former Miss Bikini Olympia Ashley Kaltwasser. Steph and I have been watching her vlogs lately, and I'm just blown away by the attention to specificity when it comes to her glute training and just how much volume and intensity she manages to pack in for that muscle group. It's been really kind of impressive to watch. So from an aesthetic point of view, I'd say it's huge when it comes to physique competitors, but it doesn't actually stop there. Just recreational trainees or people who just want to be more jacked in general, I think should focus on their glute training because if you're just out walking around in clothes, say you've got on a pair of jeans or shorts or whatever, the glutes really are going to enhance that appearance of muscularity, especially from the side and from back on. And when you think about it, your side angles and your rear angles constitute 3/4 of your total angles. So I would say most people are going to be looking at you from these directions. And so if you don't have a well-developed set of glutes, you're definitely not maximizing your muscular appearance by any means. And then also just on an attractiveness scale, there's actually quite a big body of research looking into why it is that men find glutes attractive on women. And I remember reading an old Brett Contreras article where he kind of wrote that due to the increase in popularity of denim jeans and the subsequent advertising campaigns that kind of focused on the butt probably will soon surpass the breasts as the primary sexual characteristic. And then there's actually a lot less research on why women find muscular glutes attractive in men. But I have seen from these like online surveys and interviews that women do in fact find it to be attractive, and there seems to be kind of a sweet spot. So it may not be the case that women just like more muscle, but there's probably somewhere in between, say, a flat butt and then like Ronnie Coleman's butt that women find most attractive. Probably a good example would be Captain America. His glute development really makes him just move in a much more attractive way. And from what I've heard, I think it's a very attractive feature to women. So anyway, number 2 for me has to do with performance. Now I'm just gonna focus on the squat and the deadlift here. Now we know that from EMG research, the squat actually trains the quads much more than the glutes, but I don't think that should be misinterpreted as saying that the glutes aren't trained at all by the squat. When you think about the squat, you basically have 2 main biomechanical functions being trained: hip extension and knee extension. So the quads take care of the knee extension component, and then you have 2 primary hip extensors that take care of the hip extension component, and those are the hamstrings and the glutes. Now we know from EMG research that the hamstrings are actually pretty much silent during the squat, so they're not really active at all because they're lengthening at the knee joint while shortening at the hip joint simultaneously. But the glutes actually contribute quite a lot to hip extension in the squat, and so if you have weak glutes, I don't think you can really maximize your squatting potential by any means. And I don't think it's any coincidence that at the very high level, the best powerlifters tend to have very big glutes. In fact, I've been to dozens of powerlifting meets, and I don't think I've ever seen a high-level athlete who has an impressive squat have a flat butt. So I don't think that's any coincidence. Now you could say that maybe it's the fact that they do so much deadlifting, and it is true that because of biomechanical differences, the deadlift does involve more of the glutes than the squat does. But still, that kind of plays into my point that if you're going to be doing these hip extension based exercises, you're going to want to have good glute development so you can maximize your strength and performance on them. This actually goes way further than just the squat and the deadlift. I think that the glutes play a critical role in upper body exercises as well. Probably pretty much every lower body exercise except for some isolation stuff. But even upper body movements like the overhead press, because the glutes play such a fundamental role in stabilizing the pelvis and then the core by extension, if you don't have well-developed, strong glutes for these movements, you're just simply not going to be maximizing your performance. Okay, so reason number 3 has to do with reducing injury risk. Having well-developed glutes does reduce your risk of injury, but I'm going to focus on 2 primary examples, and those are knee valgus in the squat and lower back rounding in the deadlift. And I'm going to talk about how the glutes contribute to both of those. So knee valgus, if you're not familiar with it, is basically when your knees do this on the squat, so they cave in together. This is actually a controversial topic. First of all, it's not perfectly clear what causes knee valgus in every case. It's probably highly individual. And then it's also not perfectly clear whether or not it's dangerous. It seems to be the case that most experts agree that it can contribute to knee pain, but in very highly advanced elite level powerlifters and weightlifters, because they're able to control their knee valgus so well, it may not be quite as injurious. But for more recreational lifters, I think knee valgus is, especially when exaggerated, a negative thing. And when you think about it, I think it's pretty obvious how the glutes can contribute to correcting this. So remember that the glutes, or that 2 secondary functions of the glutes, are hip abduction and hip external rotation. And when you think about what's happening when you have knee valgus, it's basically the opposite. So you have hip internal rotation and hip adduction. So the knees are coming in and rotating in. So if you have powerful glutes and they're performing hip external rotation and hip abduction to counteract that, then that should be able to kind of correct that technique error. Now, it could be the case that you simply have overpowering adductor muscles. So these muscles on the inside of your thigh could be taking over and forcing the knees in, which does have some literature supporting it. But still, it seems to me that if you do simply get the glute muscles, especially the glute medius muscle, more involved on the squat, then it should help keep the knees out. And I think this is the reason why you see so many powerlifters putting a hip circle around their knees and using that to train the knees to stay out while squatting, is because it is corrective for this potentially dangerous knee valgus. Now, the other potential issue when it comes to safety is lower back rounding. Now, again, this is another bit of a controversial area. It's not perfectly clear whether or not upper back rounding is quite as unsafe. Most of the experts and most of the best coaches seem to agree that some level of upper back rounding is probably okay. And I actually do this myself if you watch me deadlift. And that's just because of the natural curvature of the spine. But lower back deadlifting is actually considered to be quite problematic, especially under heavy load. And so I think you want to avoid it if you want to lift as safely as possible. I think the reason why a lot of people round their lower back when they deadlift, especially very heavy, is because your glutes aren't strong enough to fully contribute to the hip extension portion of the movement. So you have to combine hip extension with spinal extension. So basically, some of your back muscles and erectors that have to extend the spine have to come into play in order to get the weight up, because your glutes aren't strong enough to bear the load on their own. So by strengthening the glutes, getting them more involved on the deadlift, I think you reduce this risk of injury from excessive lower back rounding. My reason number 4 is going to be overall athleticism. So I remember reading an old Brett Contreras article, another one, where he basically said that pretty much every athletic movement that you can think of is very heavily influenced by the glutes. And I've seen some research showing that when it comes to sprinting, the glutes are actually far more important than the quads in terms of driving the body forward. And from what I've heard from MMA fighters and coaches, the glutes actually play a very big role in striking ability. And that's because so much of that striking power comes from rotation at the hips. So when you have stronger glutes, you just have so much more rotational power. And I've heard from people who have started incorporating more glute training into their programming, and they're just able to punch so much harder. So anyway, whatever your athletic goal is, there's a very high likelihood that direct glute training is going to benefit you. And then number 5 is kind of related to the safety thing, but it's that having strong, well-developed glutes will help improve your posture. The main reason why people suffer from postural maladies is because we spend so much time sitting down. This is just one factor, obviously, like everything, it's multifactorial. But sitting down all the time definitely doesn't help. And I think it can contribute to what's been termed sleepy glutes. So basically your glutes are not active when you're exercising or just otherwise out walking around. And I think that because the glutes play such a fundamental role in hip extension, and then by extension, maintaining an upright torso, I think that strengthening the glutes will kind of help build that postural base of support from the bottom up. And then this, of course, will have you not only looking more confident, but also will help reduce instances of lower back pain. And according to quite a lot of research, not only does glute development and glute strengthening help fix lower back pain that already exists, it's also rehabilitative. So if you have lower back pain, strengthening the glutes will likely help reduce the symptoms from that. So with all that said, those are my top 5 reasons for why everyone should want a big butt. Hopefully I've convinced you, or hopefully at least there was some nugget of information that you took away from this. And I figured now would be a great time to let you guys all know that my girlfriend Stephanie and I, we've finally released our women's specialization program. So this is a full body training routine with a special focus on the glutes. And so it's all based on all of our scientific reading and research. And so everything is all backed with a full list of references. So I'll have more information about that in the description box below if you'd like to check it out. I think it's going to be $29.99 for the first week of launch, and then it'll go up to $39.99 from there. So if you are interested, go check it out. It supports me, and you can get to your glute goals in the process. So thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to leave me a like if you enjoyed the video, or if you learned something. Don't forget to subscribe if you happen to be new, and I'll see you guys all here in the next video.
If you ever get into trouble, all you need to do is...
Feels like I'm wearing nothing at all. Nothing at all. Nothing at all.
Stupid sexy Flanders! Ow, my leg! This is the worst pain